we've been talking about this for a while. Tom Segura and people lump Bert Kreischer in here, and we've talked about his social media and stuff. I don't put Bert Kreischer quite in the same category that I put Segura. Segura is a guy, if you're looking for someone on the trajectory of Howard Stern, Jimmy Kimmel, people that like basically forgot who they are and how they built an audience. Segura, through his stand-up and stuff, hasn't done that yet, but through some of his other actions, tell me that he's on the road to becoming a complete phony. And this is a weird interaction where Jimmy Kimmel is the realistic one, and Segura is living in this like fantasy land where none of it's true. And it's so interesting to me because Kimmel would be a fascinating subject for real comics to have on, because Kimmel has, fake cried and apologized for things on his show and gotten his brain warped by Trump. And he's completely gone down this path of like, he was a different kind of late night talk show host. And now he's possibly douchier than Stephen Colbert. Like, it's a weird trajectory he's been on. And Segura is like, Kimmel admits that basically. And Segura is like, no, you're crazy. So Kimmel was on Two Bears, One Cave. The Two Bears, One Cave audience probably isn't thrilled about that. They probably don't love the boys yucking it up with a phony like Jimmy Kimmel. And Kimmel's aware of that. And Tom Segura is not for some reason.
Well, I mean, I have to say, it's rare that I feel like wounded by something that I see online. But the last time I felt very wounded was after I went to your guys' show and you guys posted some pictures with me and all your fans fucking hate me.
No.
I'm sure you noticed.
I mean, it was Segura's like, no way, that's crazy. When it's like Rogan has had an issue with Segura. That's what's interesting is like the world that Segura comes from. Like Segura is considered a Rogan comic. And Rogan has had an issue with Jimmy Kimmel because Kimmel shit all over Rogan for the ivermectin stuff. It's interesting to have that guy on and not examine any of it. Where Segura is just like, oh, that's crazy. Like he's about to use the argument where it's like it's less than 1% of the audience, which is very often true. You shouldn't focus on negative comments. But what Kimmel is saying is, oh no, like none of your fans want me on. Like I'm actually kind of mystified that you guys have me on because your audience thinks I'm a phony.
I definitely noticed.
You must have noticed.
I said, Tom, have you posted your pictures yet? I take the ones that Kimmel out.
See, like that's where Kreischer, people lump Bert and Tom into the same boat. I think Kreischer is much more honest about this stuff. Like Kreischer will go down the road of being an influencer on Instagram and this stuff that kind of appears douchey. But if you call him out for it on his show, he'll acknowledge it. He'll be like, "Oh yeah, you know what? I was embarrassed by that. I was smelling my own shit a little bit, whatever." Segura is the one I worry about more because he won't acknowledge it at all. It's bizarre.
Probably be wise.
There's this group amongst fans that are always the loudest.
Yeah, I know. It's only like 95, 90, 98%.
Yeah.
See, Kimmel is having fun with it. And Segura is like, oh, it's only a couple of people. Kimmel's like, no, I'm telling you, it's everyone. It's like your whole fan base doesn't want me on this show.
Yeah, it's always rough when the guest has a little more self-awareness about his particular situation than you do about his.
And when the guest with self-awareness is Jimmy Kimmel.
Yeah.
It's bizarre.
Who had to take off his Karl Malone blackface to appear. Yeah.
But they always, the people.
Well, there's an idea, I think, that like somehow I betrayed this group of men that in comedy. Like somehow I was the man, but I was always exactly like this. Exactly.
Well, Jimmy, that's just not true. They're going, oh yeah, no, totally.
Yeah, man.
That's of course not true. And I think there's a way to change and evolve. Like if you look at the guys that were on Tough Crowd, Jim Norton, Colin Quinn, not so much DePaulo, but like a lot of those guys probably don't use as harsh a language as they did 20 years ago on Tough Crowd because it's a natural evolution. You know what I mean? Like there are comics that are still edgy today that haven't completely sold out who they were. I'm not saying you have to have girls jumping on trampolines in the background of Jimmy Kimmel Live. That would be a hack bit now. But you don't have to completely sell out who you were. You've abandoned that. You've cried on television and apologized for it. Now, you can have your reasons for doing that, and that might make an interesting podcast. But for Segura to not have a follow-up question about it is, I think that's a betrayal to comedy. Because Kimmel went after your boy, Tom. He said, horse dewormer and all this stuff, like called Rogan an idiot, basically. And Rogan responded to it. You have him on and can say, well, it's partly because of your response to COVID and you've become this political figure now. You don't like joke and have fun on your show the way you used to. Everything seems to have an angry slant and you cry at the drop of a hat. And that seems a lot different than the guy we used to know. But Segura is just such a ball washer that he's like, no, totally, Jimmy, you're 100% right.
Yeah, man, you got to keep that ABC door open, that Disney door open.
That's what's frustrating when I watch guys get to a certain level. It's like, oh no, Tom, you don't need Kimmel. Kimmel needs you.
Yep.
Jimmy Kimmel is going on Two Bears, One Cave because it's a much more hip show and probably has a bigger audience than Jimmy Kimmel Live now. Like, the industry needs you guys. You don't have to lick their assholes. That's something I think Rogan has figured out. I think like Shane Gillis and certain guys, Tim Dillon is aware of that. Andrew Schultz, I think, is aware of that. But like Segura and Bert, I think so badly want to be ingratiated. Similar to what happened with Stern and Kimmel, they want the Hollywood elite to love them. And they're willing to just look past anything for that.
It's fame is a very tasty drug, Mike.
Oh yeah.
No,
You realize
the
that any-
content of the show was
that-
different, but
That hate that goes your way is because you like stood up for healthcare. Like they're just mad that you
No, it
actually
isn't.
used
That's not true. Oh my! Well, finish what he's saying because this is
your
gross.
platform for something good that offends them for
I don't
whatever.
know if it's that. I think
Yeah,
it's
Kimmel has more. It's amazing how much more perspective Kimmel has. Where Segura is like, you know what everyone was mad about? You said 95% of our fans. By the way, he's shitting on his own fans because Kimmel said it was 98% of them. He's like, you know what our fans hate about you is that you used your platform for good. So Segura, completely detached from his audience, is saying like, oh, well, they're all just retards, Jim. Don't worry about it. Keep your chin up. And Jimmy Kimmel has to be the one that's like, I think you're letting me off a little too easy here, Tom.
Yeah, the reason I'm on this show is to get some good like feedback, and you're making it hard for me, Tom.
Yeah, and it was like when I heard, so I listened to a little bit of it just to find this clip, and he's talking about Corolla and the old man show days, and it's like, oh, there's the old Jimmy Kimmel kind of just being a regular guy hanging out. It's when he becomes elitist Hollywood Kimmel that we don't like him. So I think Kimmel went on here with the goal of trying to seem like a relatable comedy figure. And Tom won't allow him to have that because he brings out this elitist douchiness that Segura wants to be a part of.
Yeah. Kimmel's like on an apology tour. Segura's like, no, you don't need to apologize. He's like, no, I very do need to apologize. That's the reason I'm fucking here, asshole.
and Segura's going to say oh, it's a portion of the audience you don't have to respond to. Rogan would ask him about this stuff. Andrew Schultz would ask him about this stuff. Tim Dillon and Shane Gillis, these guys that are your peers, Tom, and just as big comics as you, if not bigger, they would ask him about this stuff. Now, would Andrew Schultz get in his face about it? No. He has some fucking decorum, He'd be a human being about it. But he would ask him about the ivermectin stuff and apologizing for the Karl Malone thing and all the sobbing that Kimmel has done over the years. That would come up in probably a jokey way, and maybe it wouldn't appease all of Andrew Schultz's audience, and people on Reddit would call him a loser for not handling it the way they think they would have handled it, but you would at least be honest about it. And Bert is trying to be honest, where he's like, oh no, the audience fucking hates Kimmel. And Tom is like, no, it's these losers that I look down at. It's the same people that criticize me for flying in a pastry chef to make me a croissant in the morning and then flying them back to where they were.
Yeah,
it's the people that think I've lost touch with my audience. It's those assholes, Jim.
Another analogy, and I think it's very apples to apples, is imagine Stern is the guest, and they're like, oh man, everyone's saying my radio show isn't what it used to be. And Tom's like, no, it's exactly
what?
The same.
They're saying that?
Yeah. That's exactly what we're talking about here, because
I I've said this before. I think Kimmel's change might be more drastic than Stern's.
Possibly, yeah.
At least as drastic.
If you go to the Man Show to now, yes. I mean, absolutely, because that's the same thing as Howard, being on those old FCC tapes to now. It's just like a
Right.
180, a full 180, a full exactly 180 degrees.
I think it is.
You've busted Trump's balls.
Yeah, I think well, that's part of it. But, I think usually people like busting balls in general, whatever it is. But
Kimmel has such a better perspective on this. He's like, yeah, I busted Trump's balls, but people in general like that kind of. So that's not it.
what it is there's this idea that I somehow made an adjustment in order to be part of Hollywood or something.
Yeah.
Which is just really not true. And also that I have some level of like political correctness. And well, obviously there are things I care about and whatever, but when it comes to comedy, I don't care what anybody does. I mean, I've never criticized another comic for what they never. And
Well, you wept and criticized your own comedy, which is kind of the same thing, because then it got other people in trouble. It said, oh, well, no one's allowed to do this stuff anymore. And if you did it when it was acceptable, you have to pay the same price as Kimmel. You have to get on television and cut yourself and humiliate yourself because you've been a very bad boy. But like I said, Kimmel has more perspective than Segura here. He was as close as he could be, because I think he has lost touch with reality. I think it's somewhat natural when you get to that level. He was as honest as he could be about his situation. Now, if he had said, like, listen, I think they've lost touch with they think I've lost touch with who I was. And to some perspective, I get that. I am in a Hollywood bubble now. So maybe I have changed and wouldn't joke about things I would. But, like, I have a family and a business to protect. Like, so yeah, there probably are things I would have joked about when I was 28 years old that I won't joke about as a man in his 60s or however old Kimmel is, Like, that would be, to me, a reasonable response. And Segura doesn't want him to have that. It's weird.
Yeah, I can never be mad at Jimmy Kimmel. He had Eric the Midget on.
Right. Well, that's all that, yeah.
He bought my forever love then.
That's all that
he had
matters.
He had the little guy on. It was awesome.